welcome and thank you so much for being here with us today for another edition of FlashTube. For us, FlashTube is our way of connecting with people, connecting with you, talking about issues, opportunities, challenges, whatever it is around the service supply chain space, so spare parts, logistics, anything that really happens after the sale. So a couple things we'll get into. Again, very honored that you took some time to be with us today. A couple housekeeping things. You guys are familiar with them all. We will put all of you guys on mute, just to obviously to mitigate all the background noise and fun stuff that happens. But you can unmute yourself at any time to ask us questions or, whatever it is you'd like to talk to us about. You can interrupt us at any time if you have a question. I will be pretty honest with you. As you guys know, trade compliance is challenging, right? That's why we've decided to do really a 5-part series on this, because there's so much to cover. We don't want to overwhelm everybody. But if you have questions, please interrupt us. You can also chat to us. You can hit us up in the question and answer section, and we'll make sure to get to your question. Other things, if you've been on our webinars before, you know that we'll send you a follow-up email with the material as well as the recording, so you can kind of do whatever you'd like with that. In that too, we're going to do something a little different on this one. We're going to add a little survey in there. And this survey is going to be specific to this series, right? We know that you have some interest in trade compliance. So for the next, 4 webinars after this, we want to know, what do you want to hear? What can we talk about for you? What can we drill down into? What can we explain? Draw pictures about? Whatever it takes, we want to know so we can guide the content exactly to where you need it to go. Frank Campana on the phone here. Hey, can you go ahead and hit the mute button for me?
Yep.
Thank you. Frank, anybody on our team probably could talk for, what do you think, Frank, 6-7 days straight on this stuff without even taking a lunch break. So we're going to try to break it down, make it palatable, give you guys specific takeaways that you can think about, maybe even put into motion, or maybe you have questions about. Excuse me. So we'll have that survey. I encourage you guys to take a look at it, give us your thoughts, so that we can make this the best experience possible. Let's see here. And then, of course, let's see, we talked about email follow-up, so be looking forward for that. So let's go in a little bit. So why are you here? You are here to learn a few things, right? So really, is episode 1 of this series, we wanted to start with some of the basics, right? So a few of you may kind of go, I know it. That's okay. And if there's anything you want to add to our explanations, definitions, or anything, please, we'd love to hear from you. But in general, right, it's 5 key things you need to know in order to import and export successfully. So again, just keep in mind, this is sort of the 101 class. So really, what is global trade compliance? Why is it critical to do it by the book, right? And one of the harder things, or sometimes the scary things to talk about in trade compliance, is what happens when you don't. And some of you on this call may have experienced those things. Not necessarily anything that you did on purpose, but you might have felt a little bit of the sting when things don't go, as planned, or you may know somebody. Actually, I'm pretty sure each and every one of you know somebody or heard something that happened that was negative. So we're here to help you avoid that stuff. What HTS and ECCN are, what those codes are, and how do you find them? What an importer of record is, an exporter of record. And as I do work in the marketing department, I can tell you that's one of the biggest questions that Flash gets asked every probably 4 hours from the outside world. What is it? How do I do it? What does it mean? Do I need this? Do I need that? So we know that that's a pretty important one. And then, when does it make sense to do it in-house versus outsource, right? So is there a threshold? Is there capacity? Is there resources? And, we'll get into it too. In some cases, we know it makes sense for you guys to handle some of it on your own, and then maybe to have a partner, or if you're a startup, some things you need to consider that you probably should do it in-house until you have the resources to bring on a partner. So one little thing we do too is we try really hard not to make this a sales pitch. It's not about us. We do have information that we hope you guys find valuable. So if we ever get into the sales pitch mode, I'm going to try to call it. And we have the little demerit system, right? Which basically means we all have to take shots later. So it's a drinking penalty game. It's not about us. We want it to be very much about you. And you guys can call me on it too. So a quick little picture, right? Rather abstract, but based on the fact that we've been doing this for eons and eons and eons, we know that most people at certain times look at trade compliance and can associate with this. It's chaotic, it's confusing, I don't know what to do with it. I know I need to do it, but I'm kind of afraid of it. And they look at all the pieces and they don't see what we see. And partners like us, this is what we see. Taking all those lines and colors and blending them into something that is incredibly clear. There's specific steps, specific outcomes that lead to specific results. So what we'd like to is that by the end of this 5-part series, and on the journey to that, feel more like this, not so much of this. So moving on. First of all, I will kind of go with myself and we'll go down the road here. I'd like you to meet our presenters, get to know them a little bit. So my name is Ryan Miller. I'm the VP of Marketing here. I've been here actually 4 years now. It's been a wonderful ride. I live here in the Denver, Colorado area. And anything that Colorado has to offer, I like to do it. Tamika.
Hello, my name is Tamika Chalmers. I'm the Global Trade Compliance Manager here at Flash. I've been with the company almost 3 years now. Previously with other companies, so I have a little over 20 years worth of experience in global trade compliance.
Wonderful. Frank.
Okay, this is Frank Campagna. I'm the Director of Trade Compliance. Been here maybe 2 or 3 months longer than Tamika. Tamika reports to me. I've been here about 3 years. And previous to that, I worked for, some of you may have heard of Future Electronics. I spent about 3 or 4 years at Future, Trade Compliance Manager of that organization. But previous to that, I spent about 30 years with FedEx Express. And most of those years were regulatory affairs, anything from customs brokerage to U.S. export to managing, project managing new clearance facilities for FedEx.
Yeah, Frank, I've never heard of FedEx. I hope they become a successful company someday.
I'm sorry?
I said I've never heard of FedEx. I hope they make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Van.
Hey guys, my name is Bandana Janho. I'm the Senior Solution Engineering Manager here at Flash. Been in the industry for a little over 24 years. Had been in the compliance world for a little over 10 years and with Flash for 4. Part of my role here is meeting clients, understanding your needs, pretty much understanding what you're looking for and designing a solution that fits your model. I work with a lot of different business units within Flash, and particularly here, and for the sake of this webinar, the compliance world, to ensure that what you're looking for is in compliance to what we're looking to roll out. So looking forward to hopefully meeting some of you guys on this chat.
Absolutely. And some of our attendees probably have met you, Van, at least, and maybe you've worked with Frank and Tamika. So I have a feeling there's some friendships out there that have been in the works for some time. So, first of all, presenters, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And as you can hear, the audience, guys, we have a couple different perspectives on the subject, right? So Frank and Tamika have a lot of expertise, which you guys can draw from. And then Van really helps put the pieces together. How does it fit into, the SLAs that you have with your customers? How does it fit into, the budgets that you have and the needs that you have? So we have a really good perspective here. Let's see. So glad you guys are all here. So let's jump in very quickly. If you haven't met Flash, just a quick introduction about us. So Flash has been in business 30 some odd years, but really have evolved into the service supply chain solution space in the last probably 10 to 15. And really, since I've even been here, as the industries and the landscape and the customer demands have changed, as again, for the customers that are on this call and partners as well, you know the evolution has been rapid and amazing. So in a nutshell, we take your brand right in this upper left-hand corner here. We take your brand, and our job here is to support the promise that you have made to your customers, right? Which is support, post-sales, in the field, whatever that takes to keep uptime at maximums and agreed upon SLAs. Take your stuff, put it in strategic locations around the world. From there, you know, of course, account services, account management teams help make sure everything's on track. We've got, you know, Flash Track, which is our, you know, system to do all of the stuff you might need. So order management, tracking, shipping, gives you a portal to manage all that stuff. And then really from there, it's rapidly dispatching those parts to your install base around the world. So that's really trade compliance. I couldn't really, you know, put it in here without ruining the graphic, but it's in everything, right? It's in every single thing that you see all along the journey. So we will get to that. All right, so we will not be doing any sort of fear-based tactics here. This is just the reality. So our first little area that we want to dive into is sort of, you know, do it by the book, because it's the best thing to do. So Frank, I'd like to kick it off with you, giving us a few examples of when you do it well, what happens, and if you don't, what happens there?
Sure. So, you know, I like to keep it light, and I've taught trade compliance at a local university here for a while, and you could certainly put people to sleep very quickly when you start getting really technical. I don't like to do that. I like to kind of bring in some real life situations. So right there on the left, you see Sally there. Sally is she's a CFO for a major distributor. Things are going well for Sally. She's really happy. She doesn't really have any compliance issues. And so on the right, and that's Ryan. And Ryan, I apologize, but that is Ryan right there. Ryan is not too happy. He's chained right now, and he doesn't really have a very good compliance program. So what's the benefit for Sally? What has she done, and what are the things that her company is benefiting from? A couple of things is a robust trade compliance program. She's actually saving the company money. She has the opportunity to utilize free trade agreements and other duty reduction programs. So she's saving the company money there as well. She's with a robust trade compliance program, she has very efficient transit, getting the product to the end customers, minimizing any customs delays at the destination as well. Limited regulatory oversight. If you have a company that you do not have a very good compliance program, you can get tick marks by regulatory agencies, and they're going to be overseeing your operation. You'll have more shipments scrutinized than someone that really had a minimum number of errors, and so she's very fortunate in those regards. And of course, it's certainly a competitive advantage among her competitors, because they are able to provide efficient services, minimum risk for their customers as well as themselves. Now, poor Ryan over there. Poor Ryan. He has received a significant penalty, and actually, he received a $15 million penalty for non-compliance, and that's a dollar sign there. Probably needs to be multiplied by 10 or 15. But he had an export violation with Bureau of Industry and Security, and unfortunately, it got wind out in the public, and he actually made headlines in the national media. So now his company's reputation, other than like Sally, their reputation is kind of slowly going downhill now, and so he has a disadvantage from a competitive perspective.
It sounds like I worked for a few of those Ryans in my past life.
Yeah, I've met some Ryans.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of us in trade could relate to that. Yeah, absolutely. So he didn't have a compliance program. So he was actually forced to pay a significant amount of the penalty. He was able to mitigate a minimal amount, but he ended up paying $1 million in fines and penalties for that. And of course, now he's got that mark against him. The regulatory agencies are going to be looking at him very closely in the future. sales were going down as a result of word of mouth. And so now it was time to make a significant investment to bring his company back into compliance.
So Ryan Miller, not the Ryan. So yeah, what Frank was actually bringing up just now, it actually sounds very, very familiar to what a few of my past clients, they faced. One in particular I could clearly remember is, this client in particular is going into Brazil. They're like, hey, I could do this on my own. I could do my paperwork. Don't worry about it. Well, the minute we hear Brazil, we know what's, red flags go up. This
We'll get to that
huge
later.
order into Brazil. They did not know the requirements for ensuring your NCM classifications and HTS are correct. Your valuations need to be a certain amount. Well, it got into Brazil and Customs seized it. Not only did they seize their shipment, they fined them and they blacklisted them. So they were no longer able to import or do business in Brazil. So yeah, I definitely relate to that story.
Yeah, and in my case, so let's just pretend that I'm the same guy here, the same cartoon character. I'm one of those guys who likes to figure things out, right? You give me a problem, I'll figure it out, I'll jump on it. And that happens, right? Actually, Van and I were just talking about a customer we met with where they had a lot of things moving already, spare parts moving around the country, business was going really well. We had a meeting with them and we said, okay, well, how's the trade compliance going? You guys need any help? Like, what's going on there? And they kind of looked at each other on the other side of the table and go, well, what do you mean? We're doing a few things, but what do you mean by, ECCNs and all these other things? And that was a big alarm for me. Okay, well, there may be some steps that are taken ahead of schedule, which might put that customer or person we're talking with at risk. So that's a great opportunity to have those conversations to get ahead of it. But in Sally's case, it's about having the education and the knowledge to be able to do things right. And what we'll talk about later is, in Ryan's case, some of the things he might have been able to do to prevent having the issues that he did. So really good story. Now, we talked about a lot of things. Some of it might be confusing, so let's go digest that a little bit. But what is it, right? So there's a couple words on the slide here. We're not going to read through it all. Of course, you guys can have this later. But Van, can you give us sort of your, sort of solution design definition and approach of how you work with customers as to what is it?
Yeah, sure. So meeting with a client for the first time, not only we listen, we try to understand what are you really looking for. And for, again, the purpose of this webinar, when it comes down to compliance, I mean, as you mentioned, the client that we were in front of, and they're like, what do you mean ECCN? I'm like, well, we have to now explain from the beginning, although this client already has product in the field. Hey, if you don't classify your product correctly by certain rules and regulations, you can get fined. You can go into, you can go pretty much into a very dark, deep hole like that Ryan person. So what we try to do is that we guide them. We help them with their, what we call a master process. We take your list, we review it, and Frank will go down the road as how you get your classifications done, what's the best method of doing it. But my purpose of working with the client is to guide them, ensure that you have those things in place before you even start shipping. So as it relates to, and it's also, it helps with the rolling out for your implementation. We don't want to end up in that situation where, for example, a shipment went into a country like Egypt, right? You don't have your proper documentation, your HTS it does not match your product. Your country of origin is all messed up and you get blacklisted. So this is the reason why we sit with clients. We take trading compliance extremely serious, and we try to guide you without trying to scare the heck out of you. That's where Frank and Tamika and these guys at the trading compliance do their magic and really, really help our clients to prevent those fines.
Well, that's great. So Frank, a different perspective, the highest level, what is trade compliance to you?
Trade compliance to me is ensuring that you have the tools and the processes and procedures in place to ensure that you remain within the export import laws and regulations. It's really that simple. And there's a tremendous list of those things that you really need to do to ensure you're compliant. So we could talk about a few of those things later on down in the presentations. A couple other points I wanted to make is I'm a member of a few trade associations. I usually try to attend at least 1 or 2 conferences every year. And and there's a lot of trade compliance professionals that attend. I'm talking hundreds of these people. I can tell you it never fails. Every time, at least a few times during those sessions, I run into a trade compliance person that says, I've got this issue where I cannot get the resources or the support I need from executive management. It is a common theme. A lot of corporations, a lot of companies look at trade compliance as a cost center, as I've got to have it, but they don't get the resources, they don't get the support that they really need, and that's probably a position that Ryan may have been in. And the themes that I hear, things I usually hear is my value cannot be justified. The company does not want to make an investment or into additional people, automation, whatever the case may be. So at the end of the day, it's pay me $1 now or pay me a few dollars more later, because something will happen eventually. My management will not listen to me. That's very common. They just don't listen to the trade compliance people. The biggest thing that I hear from executives in a lot of companies is, well, we've been doing it this way for years and I've never had a problem, so I don't expect to have a problem in the future. Well, how many times have you gone through a stop sign and then I never got caught at this? You know, it's a very secluded area. I go through the stop sign all the time. Well, that one day, that police officer standing right there in the corner and you got caught. So keep in mind that you will get caught eventually, some days, some point in time. So did we want to move on?
And Frank, you know, you have a blessing and a curse, right? Because you live in a world of, you know, proactive management, but you always have to have your guard up, right? And you have your guard up on behalf of our customers to make sure that nothing goes wrong, because it's complicated. So we're going to go into these 3 areas a little bit deeper, because this is really 3 great pillars to start in. Of understanding them, knowing how to do it. Generally, we can't obviously classify all your parts on this call. And then understanding, you know, what to make of it, what to do with it. Okay. The first one, Frank, if you wouldn't mind walking us through HTS. What's that all about?
Sure. Okay, so the HTS, the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, it's a tariff that's used by the U.S. and it's a 10-digit number that identifies a specific product that you're exporting or importing, and it is also the first 6 digits of HTS is pretty much global. Globally, most countries have the same HS or HTS number up to the 6th digit. The balance of the 4 for the US is for statistical and for duty assessment. So just keep that in mind. Now, even though that is under the World Trade Organization is actually dictates that, you will find a country that's a member of the WTO that says, no, I don't want to use that 6-digit number, I have my own. So, you know, it's just something you've got to deal with, but just beware that you may run into that at some point in time.
So Frank, really quick, I want to know what ultimately, what's it for? What does it do? What does it mean?
It, just like I said, it identifies the product, and it gives you the duty rate. It determines the duty rate for that particular item, and it is used for a U.S. export. That number needs to be reported. If you have a shipment that requires AES filing, then you report that number. On the other side of the pond, so to speak, the agent or the customs broker at the destination will, again, well, I say we'll use the first 6 digits, but then they will add that country's 4 digits. And again, that calculates the percentage of the duty that's assessed for that particular item. It's really as simple as that. So I'll give you an example is for Flash, we see a lot of our product are Chapter 85. And Chapter 85 is for telecommunications equipment, power supplies, that type thing. And there could be, actually for power supplies, there could be 10 or more different classifications for a power supply, depending on the wattage for that particular power supply. So it's a very difficult process. I taught classification for an entire semester. That's how complex it gets, because at the head of the tariff, there's rules of interpretation. There's about 15, 20 pages is how do I classify the product? And we could sit here for days to go through that, but that's just very high level. So it is a complex. If you have an individual in your company that is a classification expert, kudos to you, because you really need someone such as that. And when you get into electronics, it's always good to pass information and a lot of communication with electrical engineers, since they have the intimate knowledge of the functionality of the particular product, which is very important.
So, Van,
you saw my mouth moving, right? And
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, I'm on mute. I was going to ask Frank a question. Like, so what I run into sometimes is like meeting with, especially a lot of startup companies, they have issues. They're like, okay, again, what is HTS? What's ECCN? Okay, I understand that, but where do I go? Can I classify it myself? Should I get a licensed broker? Should I get like this huge, like a trade association that you just mentioned involved? How much does it cost? Like, there's so many different questions, especially for my clients that startups that they have. What would you say would be the stepping stone or the first step that they should take in ensuring they get classified properly and move into ECCNs, et cetera?
If they have absolutely no knowledge on classification, then my recommendation would be to outsource that for a period of time until you either can get somebody on board or get them properly trained if they need training to do that. Or if you want to continue to outsource that, you can do that. I personally am not a great proponent of outsourcing, since because the exporter or the importer, they're ultimately responsible to the customs authorities to ensure they have proper classification. That's just my own personal opinion. I would rather take that particular function in-house, but I do understand that there could be resource issues, et cetera, et cetera. So it's totally acceptable to bring somebody from the outside to do that work for you. A lot of companies will actually, depending on the complexity of the classification, they even may consult with trade attorneys. There are lawyers that specialize in customs law, and sometimes it's not a bad idea, especially on country of origin issues. It's very a lot of trade attorneys are specialized in that as well. So it can be outsourced, Van. It's not a bad approach to take, but like I said, personally, I'd like to do it myself.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about that ahead of time. Just understanding again, and we'll get to it sort of towards the end too. There are some instances certain work is better done in-house, right? From that responsibility and control and trust issues, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that can help you with trade compliance. Just like anything, there's people who do it well, really well, or excellent. In some cases, unfortunately, poorly. So having that control, especially when your, personal, sort of livelihood is at stake, as well as the company's, it becomes, a pretty big deal. So we definitely will get more into that. So I will pause just for a split second here to see if there are any questions on things that have happened so far.
Ryan, there are some questions in the Q&A that we could probably answer live.
Very good. Kate, can you read those out? I don't want to click off the screen here.
Sure. First one is, isn't the IOR really the one responsible for determining the correct HTS/ECCN?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then the next one is, when using Flash as a broker to export, will you take on the responsibility to get the HTS code?
No, and the reason why we don't is to make a determination of the HTS code for that particular product, is we don't really have intimate knowledge of the product. We don't have the data sheets. We really don't have electrical engineers if needed to actually make that determination. So it is really the sole responsibility of the client to ensure they have the proper classification. Now, what we do is when those classifications are sent to us with the associated part number, we will do a high level of review. We will not be looking at it to say this is the correct HTS number. We're looking at the validity of the HTS number, because we do get some that are missing characters, or it may even be an invalid HTS number. It may be an old HTS number that maybe has changed in the past 6 months to a year. But we do that high level of reviews as well for the ECCNs, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that answers the question.
Excellent. And then there's one more. It says, if you in-source classification, do you advise that person or role be a U.S. Customs broker?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
If you in-source classification, do you advise that person or role be a U.S. Customs broker?
Not necessarily. I've worked with people that are not licensed, that are experts in classification. The license is really just a piece of paper. Some people I have known that have taken the broker's exam and passed the exam, but they really can't get into the real world and actually do the work. It's like anything else. You may be a good person being able to take a test, but there's no real world application. So it's not absolutely necessary.
And then we just had one more come in from Derek. Can the IOR be a 3PL when importing into the U.S.? Are there any benefits of establishing a local entity if a foreign company is importing into the U.S.?
The 3PL cannot be the importer of record, since they do not have ownership of the goods. And I believe the question was to act as the broker. Was that part of it? To act as the broker?
Let's see. Can the IOR be a 3PL when importing into the U.S.? Are there any benefits of establishing a local entity if a foreign company is importing into the U.S.?
Okay, yeah, so a 3PL will not be the importer of record, because they actually legally cannot be the importer of record, since they're not the owner of the goods. In order to establish the company, if they did not have a presence in the U.S., for Canada, for example, there is a process that allows as a non-resident importer program to do that. In other circumstances, then the company would need to establish some type of relationship with a third party in the U.S. to act as the importer of record on their behalf. But 3PLs do not normally act as the importer of record. Now, in the express environment, if you were shipping at FedEx or UPS or DHL in the express environment, they will act as the importer of record on behalf of the customers. However, they lean towards getting a power of attorney and getting surety bonds for the importer to actually have them take on that responsibility.
All right, those are all the questions we have right now.
Okay.
That was an excellent lightning round, and Frank and team, I'm so thankful you're here. Those were some very good, specific questions. Love it. I would have not been able to handle those, so thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, audience, as you can see, it's pretty easy. So if you have a question, you want to voice it, wonderful. If not, feel free to just type it in the questions there, and Kate will read it out. But that's wonderful. So, guys, anything else on HTS before we move on? Great. ECCNs, and really, as we're all in this similar space, the number of acronyms continues to grow every single day. So bear with us as we continue to go through this. So Frank, hopefully you've caught your breath after that lightning round, and maybe you can walk us through a little bit of the ECCNs.
Sure. Okay, export control classification numbers. Honestly, this is not my favorite subject. It's really not. The export administration regulations are so complex, so complicated, so much more complicated than U.S. import regulations. The way they're written, I can't imagine the individuals that really write regulations. I can't imagine what kind of life they have. And I don't. How could they sit down and write this stuff? I have no idea. And they make it very unclear. It's very ambiguous. Sometimes it's even contradictory. So it's very difficult. And there are times where you need to go to either the Bureau of Industry Security, Customs and Border Protection, State Department, and you need to submit a letter for interpretation on some of these regulations, right? So the regulations come out of the law, out of the legislation, which the regulations are supposed to be interpreting the law, but now you have people trying to interpret the regulations. It's just a crazy, crazy world. So the ECCN, there's certain circumstances, excuse me. So you get the ECCN. It's similar to an HTS number because the ECCN identifies that particular product that you're going to be exporting out of the U.S. If it is on the commodity on the control list, if it is on the what's the term? I just went blank, Tamika. The
Commerce control list.
Yeah, commerce control list. Then it would carry an ECCN. Those items that are not on the commodity commerce control list, such as pencils or a wallet or something that is no risk at all to national security, anti-terrorism, whatever the case is, you will not find it on that list. And those are designated as EAR 99s. So if you were a Flash customer and you submitted a master parts list to us with the part number and the classification information, you may have parts that do not fall into the commerce control list, and they would be designated as EAR 99. There would be no ECCN associated with that.
So Frank, hey, really quick, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
For the majority of our customers are original equipment manufacturers and things like that. Some examples of those, what would that be, like screws or parts like that? Because I know in some cases we actually carry specific screws as part of kits and things like that. Is that an example, or what else, what would be specific there?
For EAR 99?
Yep.
Screws, nuts, bolts. However, there's always a however, right?
Exactly.
You could have bolts and screws that are manufactured specifically and only be able to be fitted to a weapon of mass destruction, for example,
right,
or a missile. So those are the kind of questions that are asked by the regulatory agencies. So there's always a however, Ryan. Sorry.
Well, and I do know too, I think we have a few medical device companies on the phone too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a whole nother set of regulations and classifications considered around there too, because a screw could technically be part of the medical device and fall under different scrutiny.
Exactly, and it would have required a Food and Drug Administration review and a clearance. Exactly. So how do you classify for an ECCN? You have two options. You can self-classify your merchandise, or you can go through, you can go to BIS, Bureau of Industry and Security, in their system, which is the SNAP-R system, where you submit all the information you have about that particular product. You attach data sheets, catalogs, any information you may have about that product. And in the Bureau of Industry and Security, they will classify that product for you. And they will tell you if it, the level of control. They will tell you if it requires a export license. They will give you the license exception if a license exception is applicable. So you have a choice to either self-classify or classify it yourself. Now, for me to go through and show you how to classify, we'd be here for a few days, and I'd probably have to consult with Tamika, because I am not the best classifier for ECCN numbers. However, those are your options. So go ahead.
Well, Frank, I was just going to interrupt you a little bit and kind of pick on Tamika just a little bit. So, Tamika, as you're good at this, what are one or two things you might be able to share with the group as best practices or things to look for, or even how you approach it?
Actually, if you're going to classify, probably the best thing is to make sure that you're starting at the beginning of a category. And as you start at the beginning of that category, you work your way down asking the yes/no questions, which basically means that when it's giving you a description, you're answering yes or no to that. And as you answer yes or no, it'll move you down the list. And when you get to a point where you can no longer say yes to something, then that's most likely your classification that you need to use. So that's a good tip to use when you're trying to classify. Because if you try to classify and you start in the middle, you could potentially miss something that would have fit your category from the beginning.
Excellent point.
And there's a question that came in actually that spurred off of the nuts and bolts conversation. So it's but for nuts and screws, wouldn't you classify by the material it's made of?
You classify it by the material it's made of, but it also could be classified by end use.
Very good, thank you. So hopefully, Noel, that answered your question. Very good.
Okay, so the ECCN number, there's 10 categories, and for each one of those ECCNs. So the number 3 identifies a specific category. I don't recall off the top of my head what category 3 is, but I can tell you that category 5 is the most common category that we see, and those are telecommunications equipment, informational security type parts would fall into category 5. There's 10 of those, and then you can move into the product groups, and the product groups identify what is it hardware we're talking about? Is it software? Is it technology such as blueprints or data sheets? And those are some examples of what the product group actually means. And then the series, reason for control, that's the number that identifies that. And some of the examples of reason for control is national security, missile technology, anti-terrorism, crime control. Now there's a matrix out there. I don't have that with me now, but there is a matrix that actually tells you by each individual country what series that they may fall under it. So if you're shipping a particular product to Afghanistan, there may be a national security issue, anti-terrorism issue, whatever the case is, but that is listed in the Commerce Control List. And so a lot of the information will determine the type of license exception that would be required to be used for that particular part, or it may require that an export license is required. So for 5A002, for example, that's minimally controlled. It would be a dual use encrypted product that has minimal controls to it. So there's no license per se that's required, generally speaking. And there'd be a license exception of ENC, which basically it means encryption, but it's an exception to the license requirement. There are different variables for different ECCNs. For example, a 5A, another encrypted item, a 5A991 going to China, Russia, or Venezuela. It's in the regulations that you obtain an end user statement from your customer that basically makes a declaration that they will not be using that product. They will only be using that product for civil use and not military end use. If it's military end use, then you would have to get an export license. None of our customers today have anything that's for military end use. There's nothing under ITAR, International Traffic in Arms. It's all under the Bureau of Industry and Security. The sequential numbering is basically what it's just a numbering system that's used for ECCNs. It really doesn't mean a whole lot. And that's it for ECCN. Unless anybody has any questions on that, Ryan, Van, Tamika, if you have
I thought
anything
you
else.
were going to keep it light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just,
It's, I understand everything you said. I really hope the panel does too. I mean, the attendees as well, because we use some of the acronyms, like you just said that, like, ITAR, what it's made, what it's for. And I'm sure part of our series that we're going to go into 2, 3, 4, and 5, it explains it at different agencies that's applicable to trading compliance. So again, I actually was a great refresher course for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, if I get too technical, Ryan, you said you're going to pull me back. So
you were on a roll, man. You were on a roll. And I can tell by the questions that we've had in some of the audience here that level of technical information is probably really valuable. So,
Van kind of brought something to my mind here. I should have opened this up really with one point, is that the first thing you really need to do, even before you go through the classification process, is you need to identify the jurisdiction. What government agency does my product fall under? Is it Bureau of Industry Security? Is it State Department, or other? So the jurisdiction is important, because if you're going to make a request for a ruling or a request for a classification, you need to know what government agency you're going to. Now, if you send in a request to BIS for a classification, they will tell you, and it's no foul, there's no foul there at all, is I'll say, hey, we looked at this and we believe it falls under the jurisdiction of State Department. And they'll send you that message back. And then if that's the case, then you just go to the State Department. So there's nothing wrong with making a wrong determination of jurisdiction if you're making a request to one of the government agencies. So, but just keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Frank, we have a couple questions that just came in.
Sure.
First one, at what point do you need to use HTS and ECCN, even if you are only exporting one piece?
At what point do you need to use HTS, ECCN, even if you're exporting one piece? It's not relevant to the number of parts or pieces that you're shipping. You still have to have a classification. If it's a controlled part, then of course you need an ECCN. Again, if it's not controlled or on the commerce control list, it would be EA 99. But you still need to make that determination regardless of the quantity that you're shipping. I hope that answers the question, if I understood the question correctly.
Okay, and then there's one that Vandana is helping out with through the chat. If you are exporting for maintenance and not for sales, do you need these codes? Vandana, do you want to elaborate on what you chatted back?
I'll leave it to Frank to answer to keep me honest, but it doesn't matter if you're exporting something at zero value to $10,000 in value. Everything that exported needs to have an HTS ECCN code.
That's great.
All right, that's all we have for now.
Okay.
Very good. So obviously, we're burning down on time, so I'm going to give you guys a heads up right now. We're not going to get through the rest of the rest of the presentation, which is excellent, right? We're having great questions. This is incredible content. So we'll kind of put a plan together of how to kind of pick it back up, so you guys can kind of come back on. But we'll jump over to, the mouse is going to work. Come on. Okay, we did that. We got that. Okay, country of origin.
Tamika is going to take that. Give me a little breather, and I'll interject when I need to.
That's fair. All right, Tamika, take it.
I can be shorter winded than Frank. So for country of origin, the reason why country of origin is important is because it helps to not only tell where a product came from, but it also can be a factor in whether a product can apply for a certain type of duty reduction program, or if it's subject to quotas. So we want to make sure that when we're determining country of origin, we're actually following the rules of origin. Most countries follow the rules of origin that were outlined by the World Trade, and some of them don't. Normally when you think of country of origin, you think of country of manufacture. But that isn't always the case. And the reason why is because I can have something like a printed circuit board, and when I take that printed circuit board and it's manufactured in China, and then I take and I ship it to Thailand, and in Thailand, they add parts to it that cause it to be a different product. It undergoes what's called substantial transformation, which would change the country of origin for that part. So when you're determining your country of origin, you're determining your country of origin based on where was the last place that this particular product underwent transformation that caused it to be the product that I am now importing or exporting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. And the term that's commonly used is essential character. If you change the essential character of a product, it may very well change the country of origin of that product. So just like Tamika said, if I'm bringing that circuit board into from China to Thailand and they're adding diodes, circuits to it, now I'm pretty much changing the essential character of it. So the country of origin is going to change to Taiwan. Country of origin is another semester-long class. It can get very complex, very complicated. So a lot of times you need to speak to some of your engineers determining country of origin and where this product originated from and where was it, what functionalities or what changes were made to the product along the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. Some are pretty straightforward. It was manufactured in Japan. It was manufactured in Japan. End of story. But then there's other situations that can change it, and then you have assembly processes which may or may not change it depending on the cost involved. So it gets very, very complex.
Yeah, because even in assembly, certain things that you do aren't considered changing the country of origin.
Right.
One of the things that gets confusing sometimes when you're explaining country of origin to individuals is that sometimes people automatically think the country that the goods are shipping from are used as a country of origin, and that's not true. So just because you ship something from the U.S. to China does not mean that the U.S. is the country of origin. It's the country where the shipment originated, but it's not the country of origin of the part.
So I want to jump in. So we have, I'm looking at 3 more questions. So what I'd like to do is actually just focus on those for the remainder of the time, because I want to make sure you guys get answered live here, and then we'll wrap up. So Kate, can you take us away there?
Sure. This one's from Andy. We have to ship out install tools to teams on a regular basis. There are a number of tools within the toolboxes. Is there a way these tools can all be grouped under one HTS and ECCN?
Interesting you said that, because I had the similar question from our director in our warehousing facilities. It does not sound like you could classify that under one HTS number or one ECCN number. It's probably wouldn't even require, it's probably ER 99 first, but if they're tools, if I could, again, it gets very complicated. So if I could use, if any one of those tools can be used independently from the other, then I most likely have to classify them individually. If those tools are something like a pneumatic drill that has a power supply to it, I can classify that as a pneumatic drill. I don't need to classify the pneumatic drill and the power cord or connector separately from that, because the essential character is a power drill. It's not, that's what it's used for. So if those tools can be commingled to have one particular essential character, one function, then yes, you can classify it as one product, but the question doesn't sound like it would be. So you start talking about kits, right? There's a definition for kits. It doesn't appear to me that would be considered a kit.
Okay. Next one. How do you determine the COO is all of the product is refurbished and used when we don't know where it was originated because we didn't get it manufactured?
It depends. If I would make the assumption that there's no marking on the product itself. If it's electronic equipment, depending on like diodes or maybe printed circuit boards, you're not going to have a country of origin marking on the product itself, which is okay. But that's the first thing I would look for refurbished is there a marking on the product where I can determine what the origin of the country is?
Well, Frank, isn't there sometimes paperwork or import or export paperwork? Because if the product is imported into the U.S., we have to clear customs, or in any country in particular, we should be able to have some sort of documentation that it passed through customs, right? So on that way, we should be able to identify the COO there. I've had instances where paperwork is completely missing because it was imported like about 15 years ago. So in that case, yeah,
and you're right. And right? the tricky part to that is, how do I know that's the exact same part that was previously imported or exported? Is there a serial number associated with that? So it gets a little tricky.
And Kate, were there more?
Yep.
Okay.
We have let's see, one more. Does COO determine whether or not it is able to be imported into the ultimate consignor's country?
So it sounds like you're talking about boycott issues. All right. There are anti-boycott laws that you need to consider when you're exporting your product, is you do not want to, for instance, say, well, I'm not going to ship it to this particular country because my political views are not in coordination with mine. So you got boycott issues there. But legally speaking, there are sanctioned countries, North Korea, Cuba. I think there's one or two others, I don't remember off the top of my head, that you just simply can't. That's not a boycott issue. You just simply cannot export or do business with those particular countries. But if the person that asked the question, if they had more specifics as to what country they're talking about, then I might be able to get a clear answer. So you're always welcome to have anyone shoot me an email if there's any specific questions that you may have. I'd be more than happy to answer it. And if I can't answer it, I will do the research and get back to you.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah, that's so great about this business is I've been doing it for 35 years and I learn something new every day. So it's actually interesting to me because it just changes all the time and you learn something new all the time. Go ahead, Ryan. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so we're at the top of the hour. So obviously being respectful of everyone's time, if we're going to end, but I will give you just a quick preview. Again, we'll communicate with you guys when we're going to pick this up. And while this is loading, I've got a slow system here. We will answer every unanswered question. So we just got a flood more. So we will address those for sure. Let's see. So really the next time we pick this up, we'll go much deeper into importer and exporter of record, what it is, what does it mean, the differences. And then of course, we'll kind of summarize it up with, when it makes sense to do some of this in-house versus outsourcing. So we'll pick it up. So we'll probably just do a short version for those of you who want to attend. We'll figure out the dates and times and communicate with you via our email. And again, we will put this recording into an email and shoot it back to you guys, as well as we'll probably address the questions to everybody because I'm sure some of you are going to have the same questions that have been asked that unfortunately we ran out of time to answer. So I will say a huge thank you to everybody who joined us today. This was a very fruitful conversation, and a tremendous thanks to our panelists for making this wonderful flash tube. I bid you a good day, and we will talk to you soon.